Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. This is the second episode in our three-part series on how the sports industry uses artificial intelligence. It's sponsored by our friends at Sportradar. And in this episode, we will focus on using AI to create and distribute digital content. How the sports industry is using AI to create and distribute digital content will be the focus of this episode. As you are joining, I encourage all of you to say hello and tell us who you are and where you're coming from in the chat bubble on the right-hand side. And if you see people you know, go ahead and message them as well and say hello. We encourage that type of interaction on every episode of SBJ Live. So please take the time to do that. Also, we want your questions. I've got a bunch of questions for our panelists here, but one of the things I love about SBJ Live is that it gives you, the audience, the ability to ask your questions and send them to us at any time and upvote the questions that you really want us to get to. So there's no designated Q&A portion at the end. Make sure you put your questions in the questions tab and then upvote the questions you want to make sure that we get to. We'll go for about 45 minutes. If we just have tons of stuff to discuss, we'll go a little bit longer, but know that the target time for this episode is about 40 to 45 minutes. All right, we'll get started in just a moment. Hello to everyone who's introducing themselves in the chat. Thanks for doing that. I'm going to flip it to each of our panelists for about 30 seconds to a minute for each of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get going. And I will start in alphabetical order by last name with Bob Carney. Bob.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Bob Carney. I work at the NBA. I've been with the NBA for over 2 decades, focused on all things digital, social content. In my current role, I oversee our digital and social content teams, and our primary focuses are content creation and content publishing across our entire portfolio of digital and social platforms. And so that's everything from NBA.com, the NBA app on every device, as well as all of the global @NBA social handles on every account. So we're a 24/7, 365 operation. The NBA never sleeps, and therefore we try to leverage as many AI tools as possible to help us get through the day.
Makes sense to me. Thank you, Bob. Jim.
Thanks so much, Dan. Nice to meet everyone. Jim Crusoe, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Elevate. What that entails is building out our data, technology, and AI strategy, both for our proprietary platforms, but also for integrations with our partners and our clients. I've been here about a little over 2 years, was able to come in at a time where we were undergoing a transformation of having a legacy consulting business and service business and pivoting and moving that into more of a technology or software powered business, or what I call a SWAS business, software with a service, enabling us to open up new commercial opportunities whereby clients would work with our teams and have the advantage of tapping into our proprietary data and technology, but also down the road as we evolve those products, being able to license those to clients as well who want their hands on keyboard and want to leverage the technology to power their organizations. Prior to Elevate, didn't come from sports, came actually from by way of marketing and advertising. Serial entrepreneur, started and sold a couple of different companies, and got my chops in doing programmatic and digital media and advertising and marketing across a wide range of clients and agencies.
Thank you, Jim. Patrick.
Thank you, Dan, and hello everyone from my side. My name is Patrick. I'm with Sportradar now a little bit over 11 years and Senior Vice President for Fan Engagement. What that means is that I'm responsible for our streaming business towards sports betting operators, but also the media and sports rights holder world, and equally I'm also responsible for all our betting entertainment products, all the statistical products that media entertainment clients, but also sportsbook operators are using from a Sportradar perspective. And I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Patrick. To the audience, I see everyone messaging in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. Make sure you introduce yourself in the chat there and put your questions in the questions tab. Don't wait till the end to put your questions in. Put them in as soon as they pop into your head and upvote the questions that you want to make sure that we get to. I want to start. I'm going to start with Bob, because I think, Bob, you can probably give us a good lay of the land when it comes to what I would consider digital content, right? So content that's created digitally and then distributed digitally. And maybe we look back 10 years, Bob, and say, like, look, over the past 10 years, and if that's not long enough time perspective, you can go a little longer. Maybe it's too long. But over the past 10 years, give us an overview of like how digital content, when we think of that word, has changed from 10 years to now, and maybe just the scope of everything that we put into that digital content bucket right
now. Yeah, I think 10 years is a good time period to talk about. Because it was almost exactly 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. We were, I'll just tell you how we were structured at the time, which was we were pretty much creating a finite amount of content every day, and whether that was the typical highlight packages and game recaps and player packages and things like that, and what the way it worked was we only had enough resources to create that finite amount of content, and it sort of had to serve our entire global, every distribution point that we had at the time and 10 years ago, there were still, there were many. And this was, these were some of our domestic and global digital and social platforms. This was, the many international versions of NBA.com. Basically, it was a one size fits all. It was like, here's the content menu, and everybody, like, this is what you get. And what happened 10 years ago is when we got our eyes sort of were wide open as AI was starting to really make some, big inroads in sports. And at the time we started to work with a company called WSC Sports, which I'm sure most people are familiar with by now. But at the time it was, they were new to the space, and they were 4 employees. And when we saw what their platform was capable of, it was a real aha moment for us, because we knew that if we could create content at scale, and then we would go from a finite offering to an infinite offering. And if we had an infinite offering, it would mean that all of these global digital and social touch points could go from all having the same offering, basically, to all having a custom offering that was tailored to their particular market. And because at the time we had all these examples of, like, all of these international players that, and the international players make up, a quarter of our league. We had all these international players that were, maybe they weren't the stars of the game. They were scoring 4 points, 6 points, 8 points a game. And so some of them weren't necessarily reaching the threshold where it would warrant one of our editors, our human editors, to actually create highlight packages. But now, shifting to like AI powered content creation, at the time, we were able to create highlight packages for every single player every single night. Yeah. Which meant everybody in the world could just decide. They could tell us what they wanted. It's like, tell us what content you want, and we'll automatically create it for you and automatically deliver it to you, and for publishing. And that, for us, like, that helped us really, I would say, see hockey stick growth from a digital and social perspective. And then as new platforms and new social media platforms launched, and as we launched more and more accounts on each of those platforms, and we're north of 200 accounts that we're managing every day, we just saw engagement sort of rocket. And then a couple of years ago is where it just like had another one of these aha moments, which was when we got into the sort of the emergence of all these generative AI tools that were starting to emerge. And they were so much of it is content focused, obviously. And And so what we looked at when we looked at our data, it's really eye-opening. We generate billions and billions of video views every year, but 75% of that consumption is happening outside the U.S.
Wow.
And that's it's staggering. And so what was clear to us was that while 10 years ago we had this one size fits all content approach, and then AI helped us evolve it to where we could scale it, we're now sort of back to where it's a one language fits all approach, in that everything that we're producing, most of what we're producing and distributing today is in English, yet we have this global fan base that is consuming our content every day. And so we got ultra excited when the tools that started to emerge were going to help us solve that problem. And so we have spent a lot of time trying to leverage all of the new tools to help localize our content offering. Yeah. And so it's incredible what's happening. And so our entire flow now has generative AI baked into it. And so we can now, I'll just use game recaps as an example.
Yeah.
Is like we could take a game recap and say, we want to create this game recap, choose the length. It could be for us, it's anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes in length, but we'll say 10 minutes in length. We will then have a script automatically generated. The script is then translated into several different languages, and then that script is then narrated in those several different languages, and then it all gets packaged up and distributed. And so we're seeing immense engagement in that. Like those localized game recaps are the watch time on them is, our fans are watching like 75% of them. So it's like the investment is paying off, and we're able to really help our fans consume our content in a way that is much more, natural.
Can I push on the game recaps a little bit and just even get some more detail there? Because I think it's a fascinating example. So like you mentioned game recaps, right? So writing the script, clipping it, translating it, getting narration over it. Those are I think things that I know you mentioned in our prep call, and I think you mentioned a few of them just now. But like, talk to me about like when the NBA started doing those game recaps and when they became hyper personalized as a result of AI, and the difference in the level of time that it took, call it, I don't know, 10 years ago versus the level of time from a human perspective that it takes now.
Yeah, what's so interesting about AI is that like it's allowing us to do things that we wouldn't even have considered doing with human manpower. So it's opening up a whole new. It's not necessarily replicating things that we used to do. It's creating all net new programming, new content opportunities, and I think that that's what's so exciting about it. But at the time, I mean, the timing perspective. So the examples that I mentioned is like if we're doing, if you're doing a 10-minute game recap, like it's not quick to write a 10-minute script like that. That could take hours. And then to find the right plays that align with that script is, will take, several more hours. And then to get somebody to narrate the script, a human to narrate the script in all those different languages. Obviously in theory, you need multiple people. You'd need one person per language, to do that. And then an editor to compile it all. And so it's like, it's not even practical to do it, with human manpower from a timing perspective, from a cost perspective. And now that's all it's scary to say, but like, that's all now done in minutes. Now I will say that like we do have like a human QA process, and we still think that that's like a really important, component, to what we do is I think these tools are helping you do a lot of the heavy lifting But at the end of the workflow, we still have a human there, like reviewing the script and looking for errors and watching down the content before we publish it, because we still want our fans to trust that we're putting out quality content.
There was a question at SBJ's Tech Week that was asked about whether there would ever be a process like that where a human wouldn't touch it at all. And I said, not in my lifetime, although there was a pretty good answer as to why we may see that sometime soon. Let me flip it to Patrick. Patrick, talk to us about first of all, the working relationship with the NBA, but then what Sportradar brings to that relationship as it relates to AI. You mentioned in our conversations previously, predictive artificial intelligence, and that's particularly relevant for sports betting applications. But talk to us about the relationship and then go a little more detail about predictive AI.
Sure. So I guess, first of all, for us from a Sportradar perspective, NBA is a great partner to have, and that goes to many attributes. And a big part of it, especially as we talking about AI, is this global nature of the league and the possibility it brings also to many of Bob's points just now, like what is possible to do at the end of the day. So I can, when listening to Bob, I realized, okay, what I probably bring to the table here is very much a similar perspective, maybe just from a different angle. And if I recap a little bit on where we were coming from a Sportradar perspective, it started very much from collecting basic event data. So really the main data points of a sports event, or let it be an NBA game at the end of the day. And over the time, what happened is that we did not just stop at collecting event data, but it emerged into obviously tracking data, and out of a couple, maybe 100 data points, it turned into thousands and hundreds of thousands of data points. And obviously what you need then in order to be able to derive stories or interesting insights from all these data is you need some help in the end of the day to make it happen. I think this is, from our perspective, really the role that AI plays for us in being able to create use cases and nurture really those insights that we have from all these data that is now available. So I think that is one thing I personally just now realized when listening to the intro words of Bob. And I think adding up to the other bits, it's really, for us, is how can we create a specific experience, especially when we talk about sports bettors, that is different and specific also to their needs, because what is clearly different about sports betting and our clients there is that at the end of the day, or of the consumption of a specific consumer, there is a transaction that needs to happen, or maybe sometimes even multiple transactions. I think this is also needs to be taken in consideration when we talk about the product. So with that in mind, what we are looking into and have done also for the start of this season was we've launched a set of different products, improving our live match trackers, creating augmented streaming specific for a betting audience, but also offering to NBA's broadcasters, both in the US market, but also to Bob's point, there's a big market, probably even a bigger market internationally, to use advanced visualizations in and around NBA, but equally it could be other sports events as well, when it comes to tennis or soccer or any other sport basically. And it's really to, at the end of the day, tell a better story of what's going on. I think that is really the one point. And the other point also to your point about the predictive element, when it comes to sports betting, what is particularly interesting for us as well is not only inform and educate, but what's going on at the moment and basically display this, but at the same time also give a little bit of heads up of what could happen in the next 5 minutes, in the next 10 minutes. And I think, again, here, AI and the abilities we get through AI offer us a great opportunity, because we can and we are able to process all of this historic data. And out of that, and out of, I'd say also a great AI team on the Sportradar side, we are able to show certain predictive patterns of how games can develop at the end of the day. And I think that's very, very interesting for us. And it's not just it's not just a transaction mechanism, so to be able to generate more bets, but more and more this also becomes more like a fan engagement tool. So fans are interested to understand, okay, what could happen, because if I understand what could happen, I probably stay 5 or 10 minutes longer, produce more view time, and equally produce more engagement, if that makes sense for you.
Yeah, interesting. We've got a good question from the audience, which we'll get to in a minute, but I want to flip it to Jim. Jim, when we were talking before this, I thought you brought up an interesting perspective, which was maybe we need to take a step back and think about, we can create this with AI, but like, what do we want to create? Should we create it? And a lot of that really should be through data-based decision-making. Talk to us more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think then it actually comes up in as I'm looking through some of the chat and the questions, it reminds me a little bit of, 10, 15 years ago when everyone was, oh, I need a Facebook page and I have to get a lot of likes on my Facebook page. And that just became the thing that everyone did. And you started to go like, well, why? There's now 50 million Facebook pages. How could I possibly interact with all this? Was that time and effort worth it? For some brands and for some teams, and right, the answer is like unequivocally yes, right? And for others, you started to go, well, are our potential customers, our fans, I use those words interchangeably, fans or customers, are they here? Are they interested in what we have to say? And are they interested in us saying it across every channel that we could be doing it on? You juxtapose that against what you were talking about with the ability to use AI to generate content at scale. It's the last mile problem, right? The creativity that goes into generating that content, I think Bob outlined really, really in depth and well, the amount of sheer manpower and hours that go into doing it is concise and consolidated in a way that's almost unfathomable, right? What would have taken hundreds of hours can be done in minutes. But you have to balance the two things of, well, how much should I be creating? How much should I be putting out there just because I can, with the ability to do it at a pace where, what's going to be the return or the value on that investment. Where we spend a lot of time is exactly at that intersection, right? Now, yes, we've solved that problem of I have to go from not just saying, let's create one piece of content and hope 5,000 people like it, but I can create more than one, right? But is it an N of 5? Is it an N of 10? Is it an N of, it's probably not an N of 5,000. I don't want to create 5,000 tailored pieces of content to 5,000 people just because I can do it. So I need to unpack and understand, where is my audience going to find this information most relevant? Where are they going to find these highlights the most valuable? Where is it going to provide utility? And where is it going to just be lost in the ether and the sea of content that's produced? I think every day we set some kind of record, but I believe the stat is something along the lines of 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years, right? And you think about that as and that is probably going to actually go even small, right? As we, just because I'm putting it out there, is anyone seeing it? Are they understanding? Are they comprehending it? Are they getting value from it? Those are really hard business challenges that need to be solved, right? No matter how efficient it is, the ability for me to spend time creating content or publishing this or creating this piece of a video is still something that I'm taking away from time that could be spent elsewhere. And I need to understand how to balance those two things.
Yeah. Two great questions from the audience. I'm going to get to one right now for sure. This one is from Miguel Abu Shadid. And Miguel says, have you had to manage fan backlash from AI generated recaps, for example? Bob, directed at you, but could be relevant for both Patrick and Jim to touch on. Do the fans care, right? That the AI, or that the recap is AI generated? Bob.
Yeah, I think it's why we're being very cautious and careful in how we deploy this. I think about it in a couple of different ways. One is like, are you first of all disclosing, to the audience that it's AI generated, which I think that there's no shame in, by the way. I don't, I certainly, there's no reason not to disclose it. I think where people or brands in any, not just in sports, but in anywhere, is if you're trying to trick, I feel like if you're trying to trick your audience or trick your fans, I think that's certainly a dangerous lane to be in, and you're likely to face, backlash. But I think if you're disclosing that it's AI generated, and some of the social platforms are starting to create, platform rules around having to disclose and things like that, which I think is great. But then I think the other thing is that, and this isn't always easy to communicate to a fan, but it touches on what I mentioned earlier, which is that when you're using the technology to create like net new programming, net new offerings that just like didn't exist before, I think fans are more accepting of it versus you're trying to replace what you are currently doing, and the offering that they're used to feels like it changed, and now it feels like they're talking to a robot, and now it feels inauthentic. And so we're trying to focus on the net new, like creating a lot of new programming that couldn't possibly have existed before, and therefore it's clear, that we're leveraging these new tools to create a better fan experience.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to get to the next audience question we have. It's from Neil Horowitz. Hi, Neil. Neil says, what kind of feedback loop is there in engagement with AI generated packages to improve output or even inform global content you'll push out at a later date, i.e. format, an over-indexing player, or play? Bob, probably best for you, but let's flip it to Patrick and Jim. Patrick, Jim, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, I guess just quickly from mine, I guess the easiest feedback loop I think is available there is just a simple thumbs up or down in any kind of digital experience, and then to take this type of feedback in, and then I think in a matter of seconds, typically you realize, okay, maybe if I get a 500 or 1,000 thumbs down in just a matter of seconds, I mean that might then be a very simple thing just to take down or remove or do something with it. Also with a process of human oversight in the end where you can react. So I think there's quite straightforward processes to implement in those cases from my perspective.
I can jump in there too.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I think about our digital and social audience, and potentially our social audience in particular, because we've been able to build this very large community, and we're generating tens of billions of video views every year. And so I think of that as like the most amazing real-time focus group imaginable. And so many of the platforms now are so sophisticated, that they're prioritizing watch time and their dwell time, and they're measuring how long you stay on a post and how long you watch the video, and like those are the key signals to whether or not that content is going to get served to more people. And so I think about that as like the ultimate feedback loop, and that tells us that when I mentioned earlier that like 75% of that consumption is happening internationally, like we're getting like a really good sample of what our fans like and what they want. And so we're just saying, if we could localize that, think of how much more engaged these particular fans might be. So that's what's happening on what I would say is like our AI created content. And then I'd have a different answer for our generative AI created content, because I would say that's still, I'd say we're still in the early days of that. While we are publishing it, it's still early. What we have is we have an internal feedback loop where we have our whole team reading the scripts, watching the recaps, compiling all the notes, and then helping to feed that back into these models to make the models smarter literally for the next day. And that could be something as simple as like a pronunciation. We need our players' names pronounced correctly. And so we may catch a pronunciation that's off and it needs to be updated. So a lot of the generative AI stuff, a lot of that feedback loop is actually like an internal feedback loop at the moment.
Thank you. Bob, and thank you, Patrick. Jim, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would. I think it goes a little bit to the point we just made, which is, and I see some of the comments around this as well. What's the utility to the fan, right? There's going to be backlash inherently for a lot of things when there's change, right? Some people are reluctant to change and to do things differently, as Patrick and Bob mentioned. I think the most important lens is how am I using these new capabilities to provide utility to the fan? How am I giving them something they couldn't get before that's of value, and working backwards from there? And whether it's generative AI, whether it's agentic AI, like whatever flavor of AI you're using, it should be to solve a specific business problem and a pain point or a job to be done for the fan, right? Versus just pushing it out there and just using it because you can. On our side, we're using a lot of this in a B2B context as well, right? We have clients who want information. They need access to data and insights that we have within our software platform. We can use those AI tools, to find ways to get and surface that information faster and quicker. It's no different from a consumer standpoint, right? Different maybe information they want or different utility that we're providing them, but at the same time, it's very much about us providing the data that they need in the format that's going to best meet their need and in the speed at which they want to get it.
Thank you, Jim. Great audience questions coming in. Keep them coming. I'm going to get to another one, and I'm going to relate it to a question that I had on my list, but this one's from John Aguan. John says, what are some of the biggest challenges you've encountered in integrating AI into content creation, and how did you address them? Guys, I'm going to tack that onto the question that I shared with you guys earlier, which was like, if you're overwhelmed with like, where do I even start, right? Like, how do I even begin to go on my AI journey when it comes to content creation? What advice would you have for the audience for where to begin? And then also maybe a little bit more to John's question, what's the biggest challenge that we should be thinking about and how do we overcome it? Patrick, can I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing here is really and it goes a little bit to one of Jim's main points earlier. I think it's really keep it simple, because in a world where now so many different things are possible and you are able to create so many different contents and go out there, it's really about having a strategy in the end and having a prioritization of the things you do. And I always, when it comes to that, I always tell my table tennis stories. So one of the first sports we did in terms of really produce them from a video and data perspective was table tennis, and we produced an augmented stream of table tennis. And what we did is we did, I think, 25 different overlays on top of a table tennis stream, and that was a MVP product at that time. And obviously, when we then looked at an augmented stream with 25 different overlays on top of it, we realized, okay, it's great that you can do that, but it's not a consumer product in the end, no matter for which industry and which audience. So I think that really led us to realize, okay, even though those 25 things or maybe even 100 things are possible now, we need to have a plan. We need to strip it down to the 3 to 5 things that make a difference. And that might sound simple, but I think it was a big aha moment at that point in time for us, and on how to deal with things.
The table tennis story, I will always remember that. Patrick, thank you for that. Jim, can I jump to you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we look at using this data to create and respond to some of these challenges, it is exciting, but it is daunting. And we've tried to simplify it as much as we can into 2 components. What are the things that I can generate prescriptively for clients, for customers, that I know because I've got 20 requests or whatever it's been over time, that this is typically what people are going to want. And then what are the things that I can never predict, right? There's 20 questions that a customer or a consumer or a client will have, and I can't hope to predict that. It's custom to what they do. So, it really would apply only in those specific cases on a case-by-case basis anyway. And then we've really tailored our strategy around building out these AI capabilities against those 2 fronts. What are the ways in which I can use generative AI to automate processes that our team has been doing by hand? I can consolidate things that were taking 20 hours and shrink them down to 2. I can put information in the hands of decision makers that, quite frankly, a human could never actually get to the answer, because it would be prohibitive in terms of time and cost, and also knowledge. I can only look at so many spreadsheets at once, or so many data points as once. And then on the agentic, if you will, side of things, it is how do I allow and train our data sets to be dynamically interacted with when I can't predict what question will be asked, but doing so in a way where, and I think the group's brought up some good points about this, there has to be some guardrails and understanding about what is going to come back or what isn't. When we look at a lot of these systems and I talk to people and they're, I use this AI tool and it hallucinated. That's a very vague, broad term, right? You typically you unpack it from a technical standpoint, it's happening for a reason. There's data in there that it's retrieving and it's giving back to you. And it's not wrong. It's not hallucinating, it's just giving you information that's not relevant to you. So I think that's the part where it is much more challenging. Because, on the generative side, you can control those outputs. On the other side, you're really at the behest of whatever someone's asking and how they're asking it and when they're asking it and what they're asking of it. And you've got to be able to set expectations. I think that's one of the big pieces is understanding what the expectations of a user are. If the expectation is this is going to solve every problem I've ever had by entering in a question and having me get an answer, that's a really, you're going to be underwhelmed. You're going to be upset, right? If it is, hey, instead of having to search or comb through vast amounts of information or load in different spreadsheets or pull in different presentations, I can now get access to specific data points very quickly and easily. That's a really good use case for it. And that, is meeting it where the technology is today.
Thank you, Jim. Bob, is there anything you would add as it relates to someone who might feel overwhelmed and not know where to begin, or what a challenge that someone should really look out for and how do they overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you how we thought about it when we were starting this. It starts with dreaming big. It starts with what I mean by that is what is the ideal, if you could build an ideal solution, for your fans, what would that be? And so when we talk about it, it'd be when we're looking at all the data and you'd be it would be amazing if we could produce NBA.com, the NBA app, and NBA social in 50 different languages every single day. And it sounds absurd, when you say it, but then when you start looking at the technology, you're like, oh, wow, this might actually be possible. And I think that's what's so, and I'm going to jump to Steve's question because I think it's related to Steve's question too.
Yeah. Which is
it can almost do anything. And the biggest challenge I'm having with AI is and generative AI specifically is keeping up with all the advancements that are happening on an hourly basis. It's not a daily or a weekly. It's every time I open up any of my social feeds, I'm uncovering new companies, new technologies, new evolutions, new everything. And I have this anxiety that we're not taking advantage of it all fast enough. And so I actually think we're reaching a point so quickly that almost anything is possible. And the biggest challenge is keeping up with all the new advancements so that you can actually apply them to the problem that you're actually trying to solve.
Steve's question is a good one, Bob. I'm glad you mentioned it. So Steve Compolt says, what are you wishing AI could do, but yet still cannot? Bob answered it. I want to give each of you guys a chance. Patrick, go for it. What are you wishing AI could do, but still cannot?
Nothing I probably have an immediate answer on. I'm probably more with Bob, still catching up on what is possible.
Yeah, fair enough. Jim?
I think it's a really great question. One of the areas I try to focus I agree, Bob. You have to dream big. You have to, right? There's the changes that are happening are so accelerated with AI. I built the software and the technology we're building. I built features 6 months ago that I'm I wouldn't have done that if I knew the capability I have today, but it didn't exist 6 months ago. I mean, that's how fast. And in the world of technology, that's incredibly fast. These changes in tech typically take months, if not years. I've been dreaming about capabilities that are finally existing today that when I started my first company in 2006, I was well, we can't actually do the idea I have for this company because we didn't have the technology to meet the moment. And it took 15, 16 years. So for me, the one specific use case that we're really focused on is now that I've got that data, how fast can I use it to create a usable deliverable for a customer and end consumer? And how do I translate that with as little human interaction as possible. Because if I've got a list of, hey, these are the last 5,000 pieces of content that I produced, and I train that in the model. Model kind of knows what you're looking for. You've done this 5,000 times. It can get a pretty good sense of what you want to output. The ability to take raw data outputs and then formulate and say, please create a 10-slide PowerPoint presentation from this data, right? Or please create a 30-second video from this. Like, that's still really difficult. And I have no doubt there are thousands of people and engineers, smart engineers working on this at the moment. But I've not found tools that meet the expectations I have for what could be deemed kind of the most polished, clean, nice piece of content. Again, whether that's a deck, that you're presenting in a presentation to a client, or whether it's a video that you want to put in front of someone. I think there's still a good amount of manual work. I think Bob was mentioning this before, that has to go into that interim mile, where I hope that AI can, over the next couple months or sooner, close that gap.
We've got a ton of audience questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, I don't think. So I'm going to encourage the audience to take a look at the questions and upvote those that you want to make sure that we get to. So get into the questions tab and upvote the questions you want us to get to. In the meantime, I'm going to jump to a question that I have. Jim, you kind of hinted at it, but it's one related to generative AI for video generation. So video, animated, whatever it might be, completely new video or image even, but let's really go as far as we think as we can go with video. Where are you guys with that? Are there use cases that have been successful? Is that something that we're just not quite there yet to put out for more mainstream usage? And I'll start with Bob.
It's definitely getting there. I think it's here. We're very focused on this too, and so when we talk about dreaming big, what I mentioned earlier was where we were sort of originally focused, I'd say 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, which was what I mentioned a few times already, which is like we have our global English content plan. How do we localize it in all these different languages? But now it's like, when you look at our audience, it's obviously, all age groups, and our league, skews younger, to begin with. And then when we look at how do we serve all of our fans regardless of age, we started to look at our youth fans, which I would say we are for all the same reasons as mentioned earlier, is like we're underserving them. And I'd go, what's so exciting right now is that this space is evolving so fast that cartoon animation is becoming a reality. And so we're currently, looking at that whole category as, can we create, I wouldn't say all of our content, but can we create a large portion of our content plan, in sort of in the cartoon animated format, which will then help us, reach, new fans, reach, younger fans, and in the places where they're consuming content, like YouTube Kids or YouTube. And so like, that's super fascinating. So I would say, the answer is yes, we're we're deep into it. That requires, then there's obviously, a lot more detail, a lot more QA, a lot more human oversight of that, because we want to get that right. But it's a huge opportunity.
Thank you, Bob. All right, we've got some upvotes here, and we've got some questions that are pulling out ahead. So I'm going to get to a couple of them before we have to close in the next, call it 10 minutes or so. This is a question that got 8 upvotes, again from Miguel Abu Shadid. Miguel says, could you give us some details on how you have empowered your organization to leverage AI in their day-to-day life? For example, I know the Spurs saw great adoption and success from their ChatGPT relationship. I could go to Bob, but I just went to Bob, so I'm going to go to Patrick. Patrick.
Yeah, I guess what proves to be quite successful within Sportradar is just making it everyone's opportunity at the end of the day. So it's not just a thing that, for example, a product team or an engineering team or an AI team, if that already exists, obviously exists on our end, but it might not exist in every other company. Not just making it their opportunity, but really see it as an opportunity across the company. So we we just recently we had a brainstorming with, I think, 15 or 20 different colleagues, and that went from colleagues in commercial positions to product people, but even legal. So I think, you know, there's really an opportunity in having a diverse mindset there, also from a functional perspective, and really giving the opportunity to everyone. Obviously, that also then goes along with also providing education, providing a certain amount of tools, but also process in the end. I think all of those things are important, but the core is really giving the opportunity to everyone within an organization, not just a small subset or a small group.
Thank you, Patrick. All right, let's try to get to 2 more questions from the audience, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. One of them doesn't have the most upvotes, but it's one that I definitely want to get out there. It's from Johnny Boyd. Johnny says, how is the C-suite viewing AI and content creation for revenue generation? Are revenue goals being established? Bob, can I go to you first?
Yeah, of course. It ties to the last question, which is it's very easy to get internal adoption when you can point to revenue opportunity.
Yep.
So I do think that these things go hand in hand. We have used we are using AI to power so many of our distribution and licensing deals, and so I'd say from a C-suite perspective, they're very aware, and it ties to, I think, something I said earlier, which is like it's creating like new opportunities that just didn't exist before, and a lot of those for us are revenue generating, and so there's many different examples of. I mean, one in particular, that comes to mind is our top performing content on our YouTube channel is between like 1 and 4 hours in length. And so all of our YouTube consumption, and I think anybody that, has young kids knows this, that like so much of our YouTube consumption, over 50% of it is shifted to television. Like it's being watched. Most of our content, on our YouTube channel is being watched, on the television. Mm-hmm. And so, which is, driving these much longer watch times. And again, they're in the 1 to 4 hour range. It's not practical to create 1 to 4 hour length content, with our typical, video editing team. Yeah. And so we're leveraging, AI and, to compile, these long form programs. And again, like the more watch time, the more ads that are served, the more revenue we generate. And so much of the work that we're doing in this space is directly tied to revenue. What's exciting is like a lot of at least we have found, I mean, I know every organization is different, but like a lot of these, a lot of times we're using AI to fulfill like just deals that are coming, to us, distribution deals that are coming to us. And so we're innovating and directly tying into revenue at the same time.
Interesting. I'm going to get to one more question, but it's my own question selfishly. And I want to get these guys out on that question. To the audience though, man, thank you so much for all these questions. There's some great ones here. Thank you for upvoting and thank you for participating with us. That is how these episodes go really well. So thank you to the audience. My question is one I mentioned to you guys. I want to get you out on this one, and I'm going to phrase it this way. In 3 years, if we brought this panel back together, the biggest thing we will be discussing is blank. Jim, I'm going to start with you.
I think we'd be discussing how we all underestimated the impact that AI has on our organizations from a business standpoint and with each other from a, just a human standpoint.
Good answer. Bob?
I don't think we'll be here. I think our AI avatars will be here, representing us and speaking on our behalf.
Even better answer, but I said 3 years, Bob, not 30 years.
No, that's not 30.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I agree with Jim wholeheartedly. The pace is staggering. And so trying to predict 3 years out is almost impossible. I'm not even sure we could predict 3 months out. That's how rapidly it's changing, but it's necessitating, I think, like you almost need people in your organization whose like only job is to be tracking it, because like that's how, and taking every meeting you can take in this space, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that are doing really interesting things that might be able to dramatically impact your business.
Yeah, Patrick, the last word is yours.
I guess for mine, it's probably looking back and thinking like, how could we watch those just linear broadcasts the whole time? I think, you know, in 3 years, we probably all so much into our own personalized viewing experience, viewing it the way we want it, you know, no matter if it's the cartoons or the robots or the betting specific version of a content or live stream. I think it's then already, I mean, it's already now, but probably in 3 years, it's all fully personalized. And we probably look back and think, okay, how could we engage with something that basic for such a long time, for so long? But let's see.
Patrick, Bob, and Jim, thank you so much. A round of applause to you for taking the time to do this. Thank you to Sportradar for the support. Thank you to our audience members for wonderful questions and for participating with us. This is the second of 3 episodes that we're going to do this year on how the sports industry uses artificial intelligence. The next one is in June. You can see all the information you need on those and more at sportsbusinessjournal.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.